Well, folks, we're back for another March of the Lich King card review, and this morning we have the remaining Mage cards. This actually completes our Mage set, and boy, I really love this legendary, and I really like this new archetype here for Mage. It's basically a Burgle Mage, or like a Tess Greymane, but in Mage. This is Grand Magister Ramath, and he is a 9 mana 5/7 with Battlecry recast each spell you've cast this game that didn't start in your deck. So not stuff from your opponents, but just things that you've generated here. So a little bit of a different spin, but definitely some Tess vibes here, just going for a bunch of big pop-offs here with Grand Magister Ramath. And we're also going to see some new cards here with the rest of the set that help support Ramath, helping you discover cards, helping you transform spells into new ones so you get some big stuff, and helping you discover some discounted spells as well. On top of that, of course, Mage already has a handful of different discover style effects that they utilize quite well already. Cards like Runed Orb, of course, that are kind of staples in Mage. Anything that you're discovering, anything that you're adding to hand, if it's a spell, Grand Magister Ramath is going to be able to utilize that quite well. And then there's just like this guy is basically a deck of lunacy, but he's a hand of lunacy instead. So quite a few ways, I think, to generate some potentially high impact spells. Now, of course, with Ramath, this is going to have one potential issue for Mage. This is that targeted spells, much like they are with something like Tess, are really, really risky. If you're using this with any kind of board building card that you've generated, and then you have targeted spells in your pool, you're potentially going to be wiping out your own stuff. Sometimes that can be a little bit risky. But if you look through Mage spells, there are still a ton of different spells that work really nicely here that are just universally good with recast effects. They kind of just always work. For instance, there's the new thing like Arcane Defenders. This just gets you 2/5/6 with taunts. So if you discover an Arcane Defenders and you play it at some point, Ramath is going to give you this really nice like 5/6 taunt board. There's stuff like Arcane Overflow that's specific to enemies, so that reduces the risk here for something like Arcane Overflow. Blizzard, of course, just kind of works. Cold Case is great. You just get some armor and some skeletons. Drakefire Amulet, of course, a great example. Just get 2 big dragons to build out your board. A lot of the secrets work rather nicely. Just play the secrets. Those aren't going to whiff. Of course, those just work for you. So I think there are plenty of ways to get spells that pay off every time off of Ramath. I mean, you know, Root of the Archmage might be a bad Root of the Archmage, but it's launching itself at enemies, right? So you know it's at least going to work in your favor a majority of the time, and then lots of other stuff is always going to work in your favor. Now, I did also real quickly want to look at the Discover effects currently available for Mage. There aren't a ton, you know, I mentioned Runed Orb. There's also the new Suspicious Alchemist that can get you a new spell, Spellcoiler. Actually totally fine. I mean, that'll work well. And then, of course, there's neutral set stuff. You can always go back to Venomous Scorpions of the World to get yourself some spells. Pandaren Importers, etc. There are bonus ways. Getting a secret with Sketchy Stranger actually could work really nicely for your recasting. So getting some non-mage secrets in particular might be really nice. Hey, Nerubian Vizier actually is another great new discover option. So quite a few different ways if you build your deck for it to get these kind of payoff spells for Ramath. And like I said, we're going to talk about 2 or 3 additional cards here in this very video that are also going to help. So I think this could be a really big, fun card to play. Now, is this kind of deck ever going to be good enough? Well, that's a lot harder problem to solve for it, I think. When we look at cards like Tess and the Thief Rogue, Burgle Rogue package right now, that has a lot of ways to create tempo out of your burgling. You have like the Knolls, for instance, right? You have ways to get some tempo and get things in play while you're moving towards those late game Contraband Stash and Tess game plans. With Mage, that's going to be a little bit tougher. A couple of these cards offer you discounts on the spells. They help you a little bit in regards to cheating out bigger things, but I don't think quite to the extent that Rogue does. So in other words, a lot of the times you're going to have to be spending full mana on things that you want to recast with Ramath, and in fact, then you still have to spend 9 mana on Ramath himself. This, to me, feels a little bit more like a meme package kind of deck, which might be for the best because it could be pretty chaotic and be pretty hectic. I don't know if that's something we really want to be super good, other than for my sake, because it sounds really fun. But, you know, if you're running like a big Renathal Mage deck, it's got some survivability already. It's able to play to a long game. Could you toss in a, you know, 6, 8, 10 card package for Ramath and some support cards and just make this another one of your late game bombs and late game win conditions on top of a couple others? It's possible, right? It's not quite as reliable as the Mordreshes or the Kel'Thazods of the world for Mage. Those have a much more direct and controllable win condition aspect. Ramath is more about, you know, praise Yogg, send the Val out and just hope for the best, which is traditionally not quite as good from a competitive standpoint. But crap, I'm going to play this card so much, whether it's good or not. It looks really, really fun. Probably one of my favorite legendaries of the set. And really excited to try all this crazy random chaos mage stuff. So ultimately, I'd say fringe potential to be a meta card, but mega potential to be an awesome and fun meme card. Real quick, before we move on, I'd like to talk about our sponsor for this video. It's Jambies. Listen, Jambies makes the most comfortable clothes I've ever worn. That is not an exaggeration. They make a series of what they call inactive wear. In other words, stuff that's made for wearing around the house and being comfy. So it's perfect if you're work from home. It's perfect if you're just chilling and playing some games, which all of us certainly spend a lot of time doing. It's amazing if you're just sitting on the couch and watching your absolute favorite YouTuber in the world. You're gonna fall asleep in no time wearing these clothes, I promise you. Guys, it's plush. It's stretchy, it's really, really soft, and it actually somehow still feels really high quality. Like it has a nice weight to it, despite being super comfortable. I've never had anything that was quite in that zone of comfort and quality quite like this. Oh, and they have boxers with pockets, which is actually surprisingly useful. These boxers are significant enough you can kind of just wear them around as shorts and still have a nice place to hold your phone. It's good to just always have a pocket ready to go, which sometimes you don't have if you're just wearing normal boxers around. So these are like way better when you're just roaming around the house, chilling on the couch, getting ready for bed or whatever it might be. And they actually have a Chillux collection, which is a little bit heavier weight. I wore the hoodie they sent me out today to get sandwiches, and it was totally fine. Perfect for indoors and out. So all that said, thanks much to Jambies for sponsoring today's video. You can use the link down in my description or the code Regis25 to get early access to their Black Friday sale or 25% off site-wide. All right, so next up here we have the Energy Shaper, and this card's pretty nuts. It's basically a deck of lunacy. You guys may remember this card, but it's transforming your hand instead of your deck, and it's increasing by 2 instead of by 3. So deck of lunacy actually kind of blew up the meta for a little while. It got really crazy good, transforming into some monster 10 mana spells, and then they only cost 7. So it was like, man, this is really destroying the meta. It actually got nerfed to 4 mana, if you guys will remember. Now, the Energy Shaper doesn't have quite as much like ultimate potential for transforming as many cards, because this is only impacting your hand and not your deck. And it's also, you know, power spiking them a little less as only a 2 mana increase instead of 3. But at the same time, you're going to get the impacts more immediately. You don't have to draw into all the cards like you might with Deck of Lunacy, and on top of that, you're getting a body down as well, so you're not sacrificing quite as much on board. So I still think Energy Shaper here has a substantial amount of potential. Now, of course, number one, this can really help support your Ramath, because all of the cards you're transforming into will have not started in your deck, and also they're going to be substantially discounted, so in many cases you'll be able to play them a lot sooner, hopefully net back a little bit of the tempo that your deck is sacrificing in general, and then hopefully put some good spells in the Ramath pool. Now, we all know, though, if you're getting random spells, totally random stuff that's been transformed into, the odds of it being something that is always good in Ramath is pretty small. There's a lot of like targeted damage, a lot of risky cards that could backfire, a lot of just symmetrical AoEs that are going to be tough. And when you're introducing other classes in particular into the pool, because remember, these do not stay limited to mage cards, these are every class, then boy, oh boy, that adds even more inconsistency. There are some real whiffs here for the Energy Shaper. Now, that said, though, you might be able to influence this a little bit, much like we did with Deck of Lunacy back in the day. If you ran the right cost of cards, you could kind of reduce the variance a little bit and put them all in a pool where you knew you were going to get pretty good results. In that case, it was pushing stuff to 10 mana and then getting some great 10 mana spells. I think it was the Cleft Hoof summoning card for Hunter in particular that was really powerful, and maybe Survival of the Fittest I think was in there as well. So there might be specific mana breakpoints where it's like, okay, I know the 6 mana pool or whatever, just made up number here, is really good for me. That's going to have a lot of great cards. You know, I can play stuff that's perfect for raw math, or maybe you're looking for 7 mana cards in particular so that you have stuff to play on curve on turn 5. So I'm going to take my 5 mana card, I'm going to turn it into a 7 mana card, and then I'm going to play this discounted 7 mana card on turn 5. And very often that's going to result in blank, and blank is going to be a perfect play for Romath and a perfect play on turn 5. I'm sure we could actually legitimately find an example of this if we tried really quickly, but those sorts of machinations are what you would do with Energy Shaper to make sure that you had good plays. Now, not everything would necessarily be controllable because you might have already discovered some stuff, generated some random cards, but still, if you have, you know, 3 or 4 key things in hand that help you ensure you're getting some good, consistent results, that's where Energy Shaper really makes a lot of sense. And, you know, again, you're getting a body down, so you're not totally sacrificing your turn along the way. Still, I think this leans a little more towards meme than competitive, but because of the cost discount here, because of the mana cheat potential on Energy Shaper, you could see this card feeling a little bit more competitive. This feels like the kind of thing that leans more towards being a real deck. Will it exist outside of a raw math deck? I don't think that's impossible at all. We might find out that raw math is just like too expensive and too clunky, but a card like Energy Shaper still offers some significant swing potential. If you're just generating a bunch of random stuff, Energy Shaper might be a really cool way to turn that into extra value and extra power output. So this card actually, I think, has a little bit more potential than most in this package because it can perhaps be a standalone driver of competitive play. But the others probably a little bit more relegated to meme status, but this certainly helps that meme status as well. So all in all, Energy Shaper looks, I think, pretty interesting. You know what? I pulled up all the 7 mana spells currently in standard format. That actually looks like a great, that was a pretty good random example we made. Because if you have a 5 mana spell and you turn it into a 7 mana spell, I mean, look at these. These are all pretty good at swinging boards and making great plays, right? Scale, Immortalize, Divine Toll can help you know, clear a board a little bit. The new Frostworm's Fury is insane. Party Up could build you stuff. So, I mean, like, this is a really nice set of spells. So if you're transforming your 5s into 7s, playing a 5 mana Frostworm's Fury or a 5 mana Immortalizing Stone, 5 mana Scale of Onyxia, all of those might be, you know, nice results. So that actually might have been the right mana consideration. So next up here, let's move over to the Prismatic Elemental, a new 2 mana 1/3 Elemental. Battlecry, discover a spell from any class, it costs 1 less. And yeah, this card looks great. This is perfect fuel for your raw math in particular. You know, you're gonna get fairly inconsistent results discovering from any class. That's just gonna be a lot of random stuff. Some things will be synergy restricted, some things won't be useful for your deck, like weapon buffs and stuff. Relic cards in Demon Hunter might feel pretty bad, those sorts of low rolls, but I suspect you're gonna have one card most of the time that feels okay, feels pretty good, might be nice to play into your raw math, and in particular with the cost discount, everything's a little better than it should be, right? So I think this will hit more than whiff most of the time, and then of course if you can line it up into good raw math plays, you're gonna be even more excited. And then it might just be fuel in the hand too for our previous guy, the Energy Shaper. So maybe it doesn't even have to be perfect. It might sometimes be more about just getting the right mana cost as opposed to anything else. But yeah, this card looks really good in this like raw math brand of deck, the kind of Burgle Mage or whatever. But honestly, this might be good in other decks too. Just having these cheap discovers that get things into play, these little speed bump cards can be really nice. And opening up the pool of discovers too isn't usually useful, but with this mana discount, I think it's really in consideration for a nice 2 mana play. A Renathal deck that's just looking to fill slots in the deck and get plays for later, Prismatic Elemental could be a very fitting card for that sort of deck. We see a lot of these shapes of cards in those lists, and this one offers a little bit of a different spin, so might be compelling enough to make the cut. And then finally here we have Vast Wisdom, a new 3-mana spell. This one actually got leaked a little bit early in the Death Knight show match, but here officially revealed finally. This is a new 3-mana spell. It allows you to discover 2 spells that cost 3 or less, and then you get to swap their costs. So a pretty interesting spell here, and the cost swapping actually becomes relevant when you see the rest of the cards in this synergy package, because what that means is you can take, say, like a 1-mana spell and a 3-mana spell and then swap them. So you get maybe this high output 3-mana spell that's only 1 mana, and you're really excited about that. And then maybe you have a over-costed 1-mana spell chilling in hand that feels kind of bad because it now costs 3 mana. But wait, you can transform it with your Energy Shaper and turn it into something better, so that the increased cost suddenly becomes an asset instead of a liability. So then you're getting, you know, a 2-mana discounted awesome thing you care about, and then leveraging that expensive bad spell into something new and hopefully useful for later on. And on top of that, of course, this is just generating 2 resources, which for this kind of deck that needs a lot of stuff to fuel the raw math and a lot of stuff to keep rolling kind of makes sense. And in particular, getting, you know, a 3-mana spell for 1 helps recover a little bit of the tempo that you've sacrificed here for, you know, spending 3 mana just to generate resources. That's a pretty high tax just to get a couple low cost cards, because, you know, we had like Magic Trick back in the day that would get you a card for only 1 mana. So this does feel expensive, but hopefully getting that 3 cost card for 1 feels worth it, because then suddenly, right, you spent kind of 4 mana to get a 3 cost play and a Vast Wisdom. So it starts to feel a little bit more like the Vast Wisdom cost 1 mana at the end of the day if you really do some math there, which, you know, again, that helps you pull back a little bit of the expensiveness of this one. So I think this card's actually pretty interesting. Could create some neat lines on the back of the Energy Shaper and transforming into some cool big stuff. Outside of that kind of deck where you're doing those mana manipulations, is Vast Wisdom going to be worth it just to create a couple cards? I think it's risky. Maybe there's some world where there's like a grindy secret mage, and this has a pretty high chance of hitting secrets, given that it goes up to 3 mana. Maybe a way to get extra secrets out of your deck, or, you know, just play it late. It's possible, but secret mages usually play a much higher tempo game plan than that. So I don't know, man. This is a little bit heavy cost and heavy overhead if you're playing this in a normal deck. It'd have to be a pretty late game focused deck with a lot of survivability to be able to spend 3 mana to generate what are ultimately a couple pretty small, lower impact sort of cards. So I don't have a ton of hope for this one outside of a raw math meme deck, but in that world, it actually looks pretty dang cool. Grand Magister Raw Math is a 3-star card. Energy Shaper is a 4-star card. Prismatic Elemental is a 4-star card. Vast Wisdom is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this particular review. We've got a big gap until our next review way later today, so I wanted to get these in the meantime, and we're really getting near the end of review season. Only a couple reviews left, I think, at this stage, so we've almost seen it all, but I thought this card was really cool. It's certainly worth his own review in this case. I'm excited to play Raw Math. This looks like one of the most fun decks for March of the Lich King so far for me. But do you think this card's going to be good? I'm curious what you guys think. Is this actually going to work, or is it a little bit too expensive and too inconsistent? Is this just kind of a worse version of Burgle Rogue? I want to hear those thoughts and more in the comments below. But until then, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.